Over the years, a question that I've been asked many times is, what is your favorite Total War game? Now, I would argue that the answer to that question would be rather obvious in my case, but since people are still asking me, I suppose I ought to answer it officially once and for all. Hello, my name is MrSmartDonkey and welcome to my top 5 Total War games. An advance request of you fine folk. Please remember this is a completely subjective and thus personal list. I am not rating these games in any official way other than my own personal experiences and preferences. Keep that in mind before commenting. It's fine to disagree with me, but please keep your death threats to a minimum. Thanks. With that out of the way, let's get started. First on the list in 5th place I have placed Rome. That is Rome 1, not Rome 2. I think a great many of you, especially those of a similar age to myself, will remember Rome as the first Total War game they played, thus making it a bit of a special game for us as it introduced us to the series. And it's a game that many of us still come back to on a frequent basis. While there's 2 other Total War games that came before it, they have both not dated particularly well, especially compared to a game like Rome, which is still very playable to this day. The main reason for that is that Medieval and Shogun were built on the older Total War Engine 1 as opposed to the Total War Engine 2. Big props to Creative Assembly for coming up with those names, by the way. Another reason people keep returning to Rome is for its modability. Mods such as Europa Barbarorum, Roma Surrectum 2 and Rome Total Realism, which all change things so substantially that it feels like you're playing a completely different game. Even if you opt not to mod the game though, you can still have a load of fun with it. Every faction feels substantially different, with Rome fielding elite infantry, the Carthaginians having access to elephants, and the Britons charging in with druids. Some units may not always have been completely historically accurate, with Germans having access to a pike while forming spear warband, or the mere suggestion that berserkers were a thing, but none of that takes away from the fun. Gameplay should almost always come before historical accuracy in my opinion, and thus I never really mind minor details like that. Before we move on, there's one more thing that deserves attention, but rather than talking about it, I think this will make my point just fine. Coming in at number 4 is a duo, Warhammer 1 and 2. Because this is my list, I can make my own rules, and because I didn't want to place both Warhammer games on the list separately, I just figured I'd combine them into one. Which I think is fair enough, seeing how they're essentially the same game. They even share the Mortal Empires campaign if you own both games. While you could argue that the games aren't the same, with both having a different main campaign and access to different factions, I think the overall gameplay is almost identical, and it's fair enough to combine the two into one. If you really wanted me to differentiate between them though, I'd place Warhammer 2 here and take Warhammer 1 off the list, purely because I prefer the Vortex campaign that Warhammer 2 provides over the Chaos Invasion from Warhammer 1. While I've never really been a Warhammer fan, with my only real prior experience being Warhammer Online, the MMO that was shut down years ago, I still really enjoy the Total War games. These are the first Total War games where each faction feels completely different from one another, and by completely different I mean that one faction consists of stereotypical humans, another faction has orcs running around on boars, and a third has dinosaurs. While I appreciate that other Total War games have completely different rosters between factions as well, it's not quite at the same level as Warhammer. Out of all the Total War games, I think the Warhammer ones have the most replayability due to the differences in races. Not only does each one have a completely different unit roster, but they all have several different legendary lords, who not only have different abilities but also have different starting positions, making each campaign unique. For the first time in the series, magic is a thing, which spices things up even further. While there's many things I personally don't like about the Warhammer games, such as the health system, the artificial difficulty, the straightforwardness of town building, the province system, and many others, I still think that as a whole, these are some of the most interesting Total War games currently in existence. Moving on to number 3, where I've placed Medieval 2. This is a very weird entry for me personally. I know many people, especially pre-Warhammer, would have placed this game at the top of their list, because for many people this is the first Total War game they ever played, releasing just a few years after Rome 1. Personally, I don't share this nostalgic feeling. When I was younger I was a bit more stupid. I played Rome 1, sure, but I was more interested in silly FPS and football games at the time, so when Medieval 2 came out, stupid young me didn't have any money, so I skipped it altogether. Skip forward in time to 2015, where I played this game for the absolute first time. I was invited several times by other YouTubers to join in some hot seat campaigns, and I eventually caved despite having no prior experience of the game. But that's besides the point. The campaign I joined was a modded campaign set in the Warhammer universe. I have to this day not played a single unmodded campaign on Medieval 2. I've never started one up, never done a custom battle with vanilla units, nothing. So why in the world did I put Medieval 2 on this list? and on the number 3 spot of all places. While there's a great many reasons for that, the number one reason would have to be modability. I talked about how Rome 1 has some great mods, but they are, in my personal opinion, nothing compared to those for Medieval 2. There's so many fantastic ones it beggars belief. Rise of Free Kingdoms, Call of Warhammer, Stainless Steel, Europa Barbarorum 2, and my personal favourite, and main reason for liking Medieval 2 so much, the Third Age mod with the Divide and Conquer submod, which allows me to immerse myself in Tolkien's Middle-earth. 95% of the time I've put into Medieval 2 has been with this mod, and it's really the only reason I ever decided to play Medieval 2 extensively in the first place. One could argue that from a vanilla game perspective, Medieval 2 is just a better version of Rome, improving on essentially all aspects, but nostalgia is a strong feeling. While I have very strong nostalgic feelings for Rome, with it being my first Total War game, I have none for Medieval 2. I like the medieval era, but I prefer Roman times. So whenever I have to choose between vanilla Rome or vanilla Medieval 2, my choice has already been made. But if I have to choose between Rome and Third Age Divide and Conquer, I'd have Medieval 2 every single time. Now we're getting to the big boys, starting with Fall of the Samurai at number 2. You might be wondering why Warhammer 1 and 2 are shipped in the same boat, but Fall of the Samurai is judged individually from vanilla Shogun II. There's a couple of reasons, the ones about Warhammer having been previously mentioned. But on top of those, many people don't know that Fall of the Samurai is actually a standalone expansion. You don't need to own Shogun II in order to be able to play Fall of the Samurai. Another reason is that there's a several hundred-year gap between the events in vanilla Shogun II and those in Fall of the Samurai, making it an entirely different campaign. While both take place in Japan, all the provinces have changed significantly. While one is dominated by katanas and yumi, the other uses predominantly sabers and European rifles. If these reasons are somehow not enough for you, please remember that I don't give a shit. Now on to why I placed Fall of the Samurai so damn high up on the list. To understand how fantastic this game is, you must know that I personally don't like line battles. I think the strategic aspect of Total War battles is severely reduced with line battles. Having two lines of men standing opposite each other firing until the weaker unit gives up and leaves is not something I personally find very thrilling, and it's the main reason you won't find Empire or Napoleon on this list. So why in the world did I place Fall of the Samurai on the number 2 spot of best Total War games? One word: satisfaction. While having two lines standing across from each other might not be the most exciting thing in the world, everything that happens around it certainly is. Firing your cannons before the enemy gets close to your lines, blowing up a dozen men or more with each direct hit is one of the most satisfying things I've ever seen in a Total War game. Revolver cavalry demolishing units in a matter of seconds, naval bombardments that tear apart entire enemy formations, the absolute chaos of it all. It's just brilliant. I'll always prefer sword and board, bow and arrow, spear and javelin over shooting each other with guns, but if I need a satisfying battle, Fall of the Samurai is the game of my choice. As I said before, my favorite Total War game should come to no surprise, but to answer the question once and for all, Shogun II. I've put more hours into this game than I have in all other Total War games combined. When people ask me why I think Shogun II is so amazing, I always find it hard to find an answer. There's not a lot of unit variety, towns are improved in the same way in most provinces, and naval battles are a complete joke. A while ago, me and some friends and patrons were playing some online game while talking on my Discord server, when one of my subscribers entered our conversation and asked me one simple question. What should Creative Assembly do to regain the Total War magic they lost in Shogun II? This question has become a bit of a meme between me and the people I was playing with, as we were busy trying to survive in whatever game we were playing at the time, and I was never able to get around to answering the poor man. But I always remembered the question, and it's certainly a valid one. Shogun II has something that makes it almost magical in a way. It might have had a small unit roster, but each unit was perfectly balanced and they all fulfilled a role. No 65 different levy units that all overlap each other and do the same thing. Each unit in Shogun II was unique. There's a few different tiers of troops, such as Ashigaru, Samurai and Warrior Monks, but this didn't mean that an army of Warrior Monks was exclusively better than an army of Samurai, or that Ashigaru are objectively the worst units in the game, not by a long shot. Each unit was unique, and in many cases it's better to have a mix of different tiers across different armies. The battles are in my opinion the best in any Total War game. The pacing is just right. Nowadays battles in Total War games either last too long or are over too quickly. Shogun II might not be the most extensive game, but everything it does is pitch perfect. I don't usually feel attached to my agents anymore in recent Total War games. If they die, I just recruit a new one, no problem. In Shogun II, if you lost a ninja that was out there doing his thing, you'd instantly feel a hole in your heart. That man had been crucial in several victories, either by sabotaging an army so it couldn't reinforce, or assassinating a general before a battle to lower the morale of the remaining army. And now he's gone. The next guy could take decades before he reaches the same level as the poor man who just gave his life. There's countless little things like that, which I think describes the magic of Shogun II, and that's why it's my favorite Total War game. That said, I have high hopes for Free Kingdoms. Who knows, maybe they'll flip this list upside down. That's gonna do it for the top 5 Total War games list. Please feel free to share your thoughts in the comments, but remember, this is a subjective list and not meant as a review of any sort. If you agree with me and think Shogun II is the best Total War game, you might want to get yourself some official MrSmartDonkey merchandise, which is very heavily themed around Shogun II. Please consider supporting me on Patreon if you like these types of videos. Thank you very much for watching, have a good day, and goodbye.